Today's Thursday, March the 12th, and I'm glad to be home and looking at motive wave because there's some interesting information there. But we're still looking at the McClellan oscillator. Now we need to break down the McClellan oscillator and look at the components of it and try to get into looking for signs of when we might have bottomed. The volume was high. The market didn't deteriorate in the day. It had a bit of a spike. Can't really say what that might have been, but it came back to finish the day pretty much where it started, a little bit lower. But this 10% for one day is historic. This is something that hasn't happened, I think, since 1981 or something. If you look at the number of stocks that made highs and lows, 98% of the stocks, the 5,400 stocks that are tracked by FinViz, 98% of them made a new low. That's pretty startling, even if you go back to 2007, 2008, to see those kind of numbers and to see a 10% drop in one day, especially after the president makes an announcement about how he thinks that everything's going to get better. Let's look at the McClellan oscillator. It made a new low, which when we look at the historical is going to be a new low of all lows. And the reason why we can't look at the McClellan oscillator anymore is because it's more of a short-term and a medium-term type of indicator. We want to look at something that's more medium to long-term indicator, and that is the Summation Index. So I encourage you to go on to McClellan's site or into Investopedia and find out what these things are. What is the definition of the McClellan oscillator? What is the definition of the Summation Index? You'll find some pretty interesting stuff there. Let's bring in the historical information. So this is the McClellan oscillator, and you can see that we had some 2007 lows, 2008 lows right down here, but we've really set, this is minus 420, this is minus 438, 426, 421. So we've seen this kind of level, but only 3 times before since 2007. Let's take a look at the advancers and decliners. They're all over the place. But the reason that you can't look at that is because there's only 3,100 stocks traded on the New York Stock Exchange, roughly. So when you hit 3,000, it's not really going to go any lower. All of your stocks are low. So you need to look at a different indicator. So we're going to look at the Summation Index. The McClellan oscillator can be used for short and medium-term timing. This is something from Investopedia. The Summation Index is generally used for medium-term and long-term timing. And look back here, 2008, where the Summation Index had a double bottom, and then it started to move higher into March of 2009. And then we saw over the summer, the low of the SPX of the 666, and then we started to move upwards as an overall market. Now the Summation Index hasn't hit even a low to, like we saw at the end of 2018 when we saw that fall crash. So we still have a ways to go in the Summation Index before we've hit a bottom. So sad to say, we may see some volatility, but we're going to see this overall line drop lower. But if you look at the steepness of it, from going from 4,000 all the way down to minus 11,500. When have we ever seen anything that steep before? We could look back on 2012, where we went from 4,000 and something down to 700. That's not quite the same. We've really never seen anything that sharp before. Even this one from here to here took a period of time from December of 06 to October of '08, almost 2 years, up and down before it finally hit a bottom. We've done all of this in the period of a few months. Let's go and take a look now at the charts. And I'm not sure that there's a lot there that's going to make us feel any better. If we look at the S&P, one thing that I did notice is that we have hit the bottom of a trend line. If we look at our March 2000 low, which was our famous 666, here's another point in 2011. Here's another point in 2016. This one came close, but not quite. And now today, we've hit that trend line. Now you can put that trend line in a number of different places. You could put it here to exactly match that point. You could put it here so that you're capturing that point and this point. You could even put it a little bit higher to capture this point, sort of the average of these lows, the average of these lows, and you find that we've fallen below the trend line. So we've either fallen below the trend line or we've hit the trend line. Tomorrow is going to tell us, or in the next few days, if that trend line is important or if this is the trend line we possibly should be looking at, which would encompass more points, an average here, a touch there, pretty close there, an average here, and a full touch there. So let's watch that in the next few days. Apple, imagine that, trading at 238. Let's take a look at the volume profile for Apple. And let's look at, we're looking at it on a weekly basis now. We've seen the 200 come down to the today. Let's go look at it on the daily basis. We saw today, it stop just above the 200-day simple moving average. Important, I think it's important, but tremendously high volume today. If we look at where 80% of the trading has been since, let's go back out, since this low right here, let's take that low. 80% of the trading has occurred in this area with a low of 189, with a pivot point being around 204.50. So the bulk of the volume was around 204.50. So there are still traders who are holding above 204.50 that are still showing a profit, and they could be selling to retain that profit. So 204.50 is not something to be sneezed at. And we look at the stochastic momentum indicators, and on a weekly basis, Apple shows that the long-term stochastic momentum indicator still shows more downside. Caterpillar, this is the weekly chart. Look at how much we've dropped in 1 week. If we look at the previous low of January of 2016, we're approaching 78.6%. The long-term stochastic momentum indicator still has ways to go downwards. The short term could see a bounce, but long term, we're still going down. Google is another one. Still room to move down. AT&T, who'd have thought we'd get a 7% yield on AT&T, but it looks like we could. And on a weekly basis, we've lost the cloud. On a Chiku span basis, the Chiku span is staying above the candles. It looks like today, looks like this week, we're right at the top. No, we're not. We're way down here. So we've lost those candles. It's the Bollinger Bands that were sort of hiding that, so let's get rid of them. Now it's easier to see the Chiku span. So AT&T is showing its stochastic momentum indicators as still a way to go. Whirlpool has now returned to its previous Fibonacci low down at 137 where it got a bounce. But if we go back and we look at a longer term and this longer term Fibonacci, we can pretty much take this one out of the picture now and look at the bigger, I'm going to get rid of that alert, and look at the bigger long term, we could be heading down to 88.7%, 41.55. We could be going all the way down to this price here of $20 for Whirlpool. This is really cataclysmic, but there is nothing indicating to us that the worst is not yet to come. If you have cash, if you were if you were buying puts on the VIX, good for you. You have made just a sweet killing. And Zach, if you're still holding on to those puts, congratulations. You've done an amazing job.